The Focke Wulf FW190 is widely believed to be one of, if not the best fighter aircraft of the Second World War. As the war went on, the FW190 was manufactured to more than 40 different models. When it first appeared over France in 1941, it was a surprise to the Allied air forces. The 190 was in service for most of the war, replacing a number of other aircraft, including the Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber. Its biggest influence, however, was possibly in inspiring the Allies to develop their technology and make greater advances to counter the threat from the Focke Wulf. In this video, we'll look at whether the Focke Wulf 190 was in fact as good as first thought. Remember to support the channel, please make sure to subscribe. The Focke Wulf 190 wasn't only a great fighter aircraft during daytime, but was also used as a night fighter, an interceptor, and as a ground attack aircraft. It was deployed on the eastern, western and Italian fronts, showing its versatility. Its introduction allowed the Luftwaffe to change the way they operated, especially with the introduction of the 190D model in 1944, which offered a top speed of over 400 miles per hour, as well as excellent handling. During the early part of the conflict, the Messerschmitt Bf 109 was seen as the best fighter, but there simply wasn't much else with regards to German fighter aircraft. Debuting in 1941, during cross-channel aerial warfare between the RAF and the Luftwaffe, the Focke Wulf would fight alongside the 109 in the aerial combat. The development of the Focke Wulf 190 began in 1937, and the first prototype flew on the 1st of June 1939. Initially, a BMW 139 engine was used, however this was replaced by the BMW 801, which was heavier but had a greater potential for refinement and for powering a plane of the future. The engine did have some problems, however the 190 showed great handling and its wide undercarriage made taking off and landing less hazardous and risky. The new BMW engine would produce 1600 horsepower, and the FW190A1 was armed with 4 wing-mounted MG17 machine guns. The first impressions of the new engine weren't great, and the designers believed that everything was going wrong with this project, to the point where it nearly got cancelled. Eventually, the problems were corrected and the plane was cleared for service with the Luftwaffe in July 1941. One of the major changes was to the armament, replacing the MG17 machine guns with 2 20mm FF cannons. These cannons took the Allies by surprise when they met the aircraft, so the Focke Wulf was an aircraft that had a difficult start. However, engineering tweaks and adaptations led it to hit the battlefield. Things would go even worse in June 1942 when the Allies recovered an intact FW190A when a pilot landed on what he thought was a Luftwaffe airfield, but was in fact the RAF airfield at Pembrey in Wales. As the pilot taxied to stop, he was surprised when he was arrested at gunpoint. The RAF would use this aircraft to test and trial. These trials pitted the Focke Wulf against other Allied fighter aircraft, and it was seen that the aircraft was an outstanding fighter, however wasn't completely infallible. This examination influenced fighter development in Britain subsequently, and the Allies tended to copy a number of different features from the Focke Wulf. There isn't much higher praise than having one of your enemies copy your design. The FW190 would show up the earlier Spitfires. It was faster than the Spitfire 5 and more manoeuvrable in every way except for its turning circle. During their first appearance, it shot down 3 Spitfires. At the infamous raid on Dieppe, it would also maintain superiority over the airspace and ensured that the RAF didn't get a victory, thus leading to a disastrous amphibious landing. In February 1942, the Focke Wulf was used to provide cover for German battle cruisers as they tried to reach North German ports. In one mission, they destroyed all 6 attacking Royal Navy Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers. This new fighter was a huge shock to the RAF and appeared much faster and was more agile than the iconic Spitfire. The Focke Wulf was a determined opponent in dogfights too, and was dangerous due to its heavier weapons. The pilots would work in pairs, giving each other tactical support in battle. Another positive was the excellent visibility inside the cockpit, which allowed pilots to assist each other and also check for enemies. As time went on, the Focke Wulf became a feared opponent for the Allies, and it inflicted huge losses on the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator bomber crews. It became nearly impossible to stop until the Mustang entered service in 1944. In fact, in spring 1943, the Luftwaffe would down 15 heavy bombers of the US 8th Air Force, forcing the regiment to withdraw for a month. The Focke Wulf would be key to this, and would regularly be in the thorn of the side of the American heavy bombers. By the end of 1942, the Focke Wulf was fighting in North Africa and on the Eastern Front, and also on the Western Front. On the Eastern Front, the aircraft was effective in low-lying ground attacks on vehicle convoys and tanks. Here, the aircraft would carry 250 and 500 pound bombs, which could easily knock out a tank. One issue here though was, like much of the conflict on the Eastern Front, keeping the aircraft supplied, and the planes were flying up to 8 sorties a day at the time. The air-cooled engine of the 190 and the wide-track landing gear was well suited to the harsh Russian conditions, and the aircraft shifted to a more ground attack aircraft with the 190F model. In 1943, the Luftwaffe required a fighter with a better high altitude performance, and tweaks were suggested to the Focke Wulf. The answer to this was the long-nosed D model, also known as Dora. The first production model was produced in summer 1944. The plane's purpose would shift from offensive to defensive, and would be tasked with facing Allied bombers, particularly the new American Super Fortress. The 190D was the first model to use a liquid-cooled engine, and was very good as a high-altitude interceptor, and was also as good as the Mustang or other later Spitfire models. Also, the later models wouldn't have altitude restrictions that the earlier models had. The first missions of the new model would provide cover for the Me-262 fighter jets during takeoff when they were vulnerable. The opinion within the pilots was that this new model was the best Luftwaffe propelled-driven fighter of the whole war, and was more than a match for the P-51 Mustang. The later war's air campaigns changed the nature of the missions the Luftwaffe would need to face. As the war went on, the different models of the Focke Wulf were constantly in contact with enemy aircraft and bombers. This led to improvements in the cannons and underwing rockets. Later, bomber racks were fitted to the airframe under the fuselage to allow the aircraft to have a wider bombing capability when attacking ground targets. By the end of the war, German fighter airfields were forced closer back towards Berlin in the fear of being bombed, and the Focke Wulf became more of a ground attack and support aircraft as the German air power decreased. Despite this, the pilots fought on. However, the Allied bombing campaign reduced the numbers hugely, and the Focke Wulf could not save the Third Reich from defeat. By the end of the war, more than 20,000 Focke Wulf 190s had been built. At its peak, 22 were being made daily and sent straight into the skies. When the hostilities ended, the Luftwaffe had more than 1,600 Focke Wulfs, with around half being used for ground attack. Following the war, the designer Kurt Tank would leave Germany, and countries would bid for his services in aircraft development, showing how much of a genius he was for designing the Focke Wulf. The 190 would maintain superiority over Allied fighters until the introduction of the Spitfire Mark IX, spurring the Allies on to innovate and develop a more superior fighter. German pilots viewed it as a thrilling machine and said that the difference between the Focke Wulf and the Bf-109 was the room in the cockpit and the more simpler controls. Also, it was said to be much more stable in flight and with landing. However, the engine performance at great heights was inadequate in the earlier models, but the plane had excellent firepower. Hauptmann Heinz Langer, a flying ace with 70 victories, stated that he believed the Focke Wulf to be much more manoeuvrable than the Messerschmitt, and you could pull a lot of G-force once you had mastered the controls. He also said that the central cannon was much more accurate, but in a dogfight the Focke Wulf could perform high and tight G-turns, but without warning could sometimes go in the other direction. Some Allies considered the Focke Wulf to be greater than the Spitfire and other aircraft that the Allies had. The Soviets even considered the Focke Wulf to be more superior to the Bf-109. However, it was found that the Lechovkin La-5 was the superior fighter in a dogfight, even though the German plane was praised for its weapon stability, windshield and other features. Its greatest strengths were its huge armaments and its ability to be tweaked and changed, creating many different variants and specifications. It was lightning fast and struck fear into the hearts of the Allied pilots. The fact that the aircraft had many different purposes also show how versatile it was, from carrying bombs, knocking out tanks on the Eastern Front, to shooting bomber aircraft out of the sky. The Focke Wulf could do pretty much anything in aerial combat. It certainly was an effective aircraft. Once again, thanks for watching. To support the channel, please make sure to subscribe. Once again, thanks for watching.